The lights on the bridge of the Void Piercer burned cold and blue. Admiral Zekthol stood with his forearms crossed behind his back, watching the stars through the massive viewport. His reptilian skin gleamed under the artificial light as he turned to face the newest addition to his collection of prisoners. Colonel Jake Morrison sat in the energy cage at the center of the bridge. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his left eye. His military uniform was torn and dirty from the battle on Colony 7. But his eyes remained sharp and alert, studying every alien face around him. The bridge crew was a mix of different species from across the Hegemony Alliance. Tall, thin beings with blue skin worked alongside short, furry creatures with 6 arms. All of them had joined together for one purpose: to stop humanity from spreading further into their galaxy. "So this is what passes for humanity's best warrior," Zekthol said, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. "I expected something more impressive." Commander Veltar stepped forward. The crystalline being's body caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns across the walls. "Our intelligence reports indicate this human has been responsible for 17 successful raids against our supply lines. His tactical knowledge could prove valuable." Zekthol walked in a slow circle around the energy cage. Morrison's eyes followed him, but the human said nothing. "Tell me, Colonel Morrison, how does it feel to know your species is fighting a war they cannot win?" Morrison remained silent. Dr. Nexara approached from the science station. Her 8 legs clicked against the metal floor as she moved. In her many hands, she carried data tablets filled with information about human culture. "Admiral, perhaps I should share what we have learned about their species. It might help break his resolve." "Please do, Doctor," Zekthol said. "I am curious to understand what drives these creatures." Dr. Nexara activated a holographic display above Morrison's.
"Okay."
Images of Earth appeared, showing human cities and monuments. Humans are a remarkably primitive species despite their recent technological advances. They still cling to ancient belief systems and fairy tales from their past. The images changed to show ancient Greek temples and statues. They once believed in beings called gods who lived on mountaintops and controlled the weather. They created stories about warriors who could not be killed and heroes who could lift mountains. Morrison's jaw tightened, but he still said nothing. "Look at this," Dr. Nexara continued, clearly enjoying herself. "They told stories about a man named Hercules who performed 12 impossible tasks, a warrior named Achilles who could not be harmed except on his heel, Vikings who claimed to become animals in battle." Commander Veltar added more images to the display. "Our analysis shows these stories were created because humans felt weak and helpless. They invented these heroes because they wished they could be strong like us." The other bridge crew members began to laugh. The sound filled the air, clicks, whistles, and roars of amusement from dozens of different species. "It makes perfect sense," said Zormoth, the ship's tactical officer. His gaseous form swirled inside a containment suit as he spoke. "A species that can barely survive on their own planet would need to dream about being powerful." Morrison's hands slowly formed fists inside the energy cage. Dr. Nexara brought up more images. "They even tell their children these ridiculous stories. Tales about knights fighting dragons, wizards casting spells, and giants who could reshape the land itself. Complete fantasy." "The psychological profile is clear," Commander Veltar said. "Humans tell these stories because they know they are the weakest species in the galaxy. Their myths are nothing more than wishful thinking." Admiral Zekthol nodded. "It explains why they fight so poorly. They are waiting for their imaginary heroes to save them." More laughter filled the bridge. Morrison looked around at all the different alien faces, each one filled with amusement at his expense. His breathing had become deeper and slower. "What I find most amusing," Dr. Nexara said, "is that they actually teach these stories to their young as if they were real history. Imagine filling a child's mind with such nonsense." She showed images of human children listening to bedtime stories. They tell them about brave knights and powerful wizards as if such beings could actually exist. No wonder humans grow up to be so disappointed with reality. Morrison finally spoke, his voice quiet and steady. "You find our stories funny?" Admiral Zekthol leaned forward. Finally, he speaks. Yes, human. We find your primitive fairy tales quite entertaining. They show us exactly how inferior your species truly is. Every other species we have encountered eventually stopped believing in magic and myths, Commander Veltar added. But humans cling to these childish stories even as adults. It shows a fundamental weakness in your thinking. Morrison looked directly at Admiral Zekthol. You think our stories make us weak? I know they do, Zekthol replied. A strong species does not need to invent imaginary heroes. We are our own heroes. The alien crew laughed again, louder this time. Morrison sat quietly in his cage, watching, them all with those sharp, alert eyes. Something had changed in his expression, but the aliens were too busy enjoying their joke to notice. Dr. Nexara pulled up one final image, a statue of David facing Goliath. This one is particularly amusing. A small human defeating a giant with nothing but a stone. Clearly the fantasy of a species that feels small and helpless. Morrison smiled for the first time since his capture. It was not a pleasant expression. Theo. Laughter on the bridge slowly died away as the aliens began to notice that smile. Something about it made them uncomfortable, though they could not say why. Tell me more about what you think our stories mean, Morrison said softly. Admiral Zekthol felt a chill run down his spine, though he could not explain why a simple human prisoner would make him feel that way. Admiral Zekthol decided to bring in more officers to help break the human prisoner. He wanted Morrison to understand exactly how foolish his species was. The bridge became crowded as alien experts arrived from different parts of the ship. Dr. Nexara spread her data tablets across a metal table. I have spent years studying human culture, Colonel Morrison. Every story your people tell reveals the same truth. You are afraid of being weak. She activated a larger holographic display that filled half the bridge. Ancient Greek warriors appeared in the air, fighting with swords and shields. Your Troy War, for example. You claim it lasted 10 years. You tell stories about warriors who could kill hundreds of enemies single-handed. Morrison watched the images but said nothing. Achilles, your greatest fighter, Dr. Nexara continued. You claim he was invulnerable everywhere except his heel. This is obviously a story created by people who felt fragile. You wanted to imagine what it would be like to be unbreakable. Commander Veltar joined the interrogation. His crystalline body reflected the holographic images, making them dance across the walls. We have studied your mythology extensively. The pattern is always the same. Weak humans facing impossible challenges and somehow winning through supernatural strength they never actually possessed. New images appeared. Hercules lifting massive stones, fighting lions with his bare hands, holding up the sky itself. The alien crew began to laugh again as they watched the ancient artwork. 12 labors, Zormoth said from his containment suit. Your Hercules supposedly performed 12 impossible tasks, moving rivers, killing monsters, cleaning stables in a single day. The fantasies of a species that struggles to accomplish even simple work. Dr. Nexara brought up images of Norse warriors. Your Viking berserkers are particularly interesting. Men who claim to become bears or wolves in battle. They said they felt no pain and could not be stopped by normal weapons. Chemical enhancement combined with mass hallucination, Commander Veltar explained. Your primitive ancestors used drugs and group psychology to convince themselves they were stronger than they actually were. More aliens arrived on the bridge. Captain Mordek, a being covered in thick armor plating, studied Morrison with compound eyes. I have fought humans in 17 battles. They die as easily as any other species. These stories about unstoppable warriors are clearly lies. Morrison shifted in his energy cage. The movement was small, but several aliens stepped back without realizing why. Dr. Nexara displayed images of Celtic warriors. Your stories about these fighters are even more ridiculous. Men who claim to channel the spirits of animals. Women who could predict the future. Warriors who said they could not be killed by normal weapons. All cultures have their primitive period, said Lieutenant Kexelar, a small blue-skinned being who served as the ship's historian. But most species abandon these childish beliefs when they develop real science. Humans seem unable to let go of their fairy tales. The holographic display changed to show Native American warriors. These humans claimed to speak with spirits, to draw power from nature itself. They believed they could become one with animals and gain their strength. Morrison's breathing had become very steady. His chest rose and fell in a slow, measured rhythm that somehow made the air on the bridge feel heavier. "What about your modern stories?" Dr. Nexara asked. "Even now, humans create entertainment about superhuman beings. Men who can fly, women who can lift vehicles, warriors who can fight armies alone." Images of comic book heroes filled the air above Morrison's cage. Superman, Wonder Woman, Captain America, all the fictional characters that humans love to watch and read about. "Still dreaming of being strong," Commander Veltar observed. "Even after discovering space travel and advanced technology, humans continue to fantasize about having power they will never possess." Captain Mordek laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "I have killed human soldiers by the hundreds. If any of them possessed even a fraction of the abilities in these stories, how could they die so easily?" Dr. Nexara brought up statistical data. Human physical capabilities are well documented. Average strength, speed, and endurance all fall below galactic mean. Bone density is lower than most species. Reaction time is adequate but not exceptional. "The evidence is clear," Lieutenant Kexelar added. "Humans tell these stories because they know they are weak. The myths are psychological. Compensation for their physical limitations." Morrison finally spoke again. "You have studied our stories for years." "Decades," Dr. Nexara corrected proudly. "I am considered the galaxy's leading expert on human mythology and folklore." "And you believe you understand what they mean?" "Admiral." Zekthol stepped closer to the energy cage. "We understand perfectly. Your species creates fantasies about strength because you lack real power. Your stories are the dreams of the powerless." Morrison looked around the bridge at all the alien faces. "You think our myths exist because we wish we were stronger?" "Obviously," Commander Veltar said. "What other explanation could there be?" The human prisoner was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but somehow it carried more weight than before. "What if you have it backwards?" Dr. Nexara tilted her head. "Backwards? What do you mean?" "What if we don't tell these stories because we wish we were stronger?" Morrison said. "What if we tell them because we need to remember what it means to hold back?" The bridge fell silent. Several aliens exchanged confused glances. Admiral Zekthol narrowed his reptilian eyes. "Explain yourself, human." Morrison smiled again. That same unsettling expression from before. "You want to understand our stories? Then let me tell you what they really mean." The energy cage around Morrison began to flicker slightly, though none of the aliens noticed yet. Admiral Zekthol was not satisfied with Morrison's cryptic words. He wanted the human to break completely. He decided to make the interrogation more personal and cruel than anything they had done before. The Admiral sent orders throughout the ship to gather every piece of human cultural data they possessed. Within an hour, the bridge was crowded with alien specialists, carrying data tablets and recording devices. They brought everything: children's stories, fairy tales, religious texts, and entertainment media from across human history. Dr. Nexara activated speakers throughout the bridge and began playing recordings of human families. The sound of young voices filled the air as children listened to bedtime stories about brave knights and magical wizards. Their innocent laughter echoed off the metal walls. "Listen to this pathetic display," Dr. Nexara said with obvious pleasure. "Human parents filling their offspring's minds with impossible lies from the moment they can understand language." The recording played a human father reading to his small daughter about a princess trapped in a tower. The little girl asked if the dragon in the story was real. Her father gently told her it was just pretend, but that brave people like the knight existed everywhere. Morrison's hands slowly formed fists inside his energy cage. His knuckles turned white from the pressure, but his face remained perfectly calm. "Even the adults admit the stories are false," Commander Veltar observed with satisfaction. Yet they continue poisoning young minds with these fantasies. This proves humans are psychologically dependent on delusions of strength. Admiral Zekthol activated wall displays showing recent footage from human colonies under attack. Cities burned while people ran in panic. Human soldiers retreated under overwhelming hegemony firepower. The images showed complete defeat and helplessness. "Where are your mighty heroes now?" Zekthol asked, gesturing at the destruction. "Where is your invincible Achilles when your worlds burn? Where is your powerful Hercules when your children die screaming?" Morrison's breathing became deeper and more controlled. Each exhale seemed to make the air on the bridge feel heavier, though none of the aliens noticed this yet. A young alien officer entered the bridge. Sub-Commander Crixnell was eager to prove himself to his superiors. He carried several data tablets, filled with what he considered his greatest discoveries about human weakness. "Admiral, I have found the most ridiculous human myths of all," Crixnell announced excitedly. "Stories from their recent history that prove they never stopped creating impossible fantasies." New holographic images appeared above Morrison's cage. Paul Bunyan appeared first, a giant human with an enormous blue ox, supposedly capable of creating lakes with his footsteps. Then John Henry, a man who claimed he could work faster than steam-powered machines. Finally, Pecos Bill, who allegedly rode tornadoes and used poisonous snakes as ropes. "These stories are barely 300 years old," Crixnell explained with delight. Even after developing advanced technology, humans continued creating tales about impossible strength and endurance. The bridge crew erupted in fresh laughter. Dr. Nexara was clicking her mandibles in amusement, while Commander Veltar's crystalline body sparkled with reflected light from his shaking. "A human who could outwork machines?" Captain Mordek laughed, his armored form clattering. "When their own documented physical capabilities are so pathetically limited, the desperation is almost pitiful." Morrison's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm that somehow made the metal floor vibrate slightly. Still, none of the aliens paid attention to these small changes. Lieutenant Kexelar joined the mockery by displaying human superhero comics and movies. "Look at their modern entertainment. Flying humans, people who lift vehicles, warriors who fight entire armies alone. Always the same desperate themes. They spend enormous amounts of their currency creating stories about abilities they will never possess," Commander Veltar added. "It demonstrates how deeply their physical inadequacy affects their mental state." Admiral Zekthol decided to broadcast the interrogation to the entire hegemony fleet. He wanted every alien soldier to see and laugh at human weakness. Within minutes, thousands of beings across dozens of ships were watching the proceedings. "Citizens of the Hegemony Alliance," Zekthol announced proudly. "Observe the mythology of our enemies. See how their weakness has created an entire culture based on impossible dreams and childish fantasies." Communication channels filled with laughter from alien crews throughout the fleet. Hundreds of different species were united in their amusement at human storytelling. The sound echoed through space itself. Morrison looked up at the communication displays showing alien faces from ship after ship. All of them were laughing at his species' stories. His jaw tightened, and the metal floor beneath his feet developed. "Hairline cracks. Tell us, Colonel Morrison," Dr. Nexara said loudly enough for the entire fleet to hear. "Which of your imaginary heroes do you pray will save you now? Will Superman fly through space to rescue you? Perhaps your Greek gods will descend from their mountain?" The laughter grew even louder. Morrison closed his eyes and remained perfectly still for several long seconds. When he opened them again, something fundamental had changed. The bridge lighting seemed dimmer somehow, though no controls had been touched. Several aliens took unconscious steps backward as their survival instincts activated, for reasons they could not explain. "You want to know about our heroes," Morrison said quietly, but his voice carried more weight than it should have. "Yes," Admiral Zekthol replied, though confidence was leaving his voice. "Tell us why your weak species need such ridiculous fantasies to comfort themselves." Morrison stood, up slowly inside his energy cage. The movement should have been impossible. The restraint field was specifically designed to keep prisoners seated and motionless. But Morrison rose to his full height without any apparent effort. The energy cage began to flicker and spark around him. "Our heroes are not fantasies. Morrison said calmly. Several aliens stepped further backward without understanding why. Dr. Nexara's instruments were beginning to show readings that made no sense. Morrison smiled, and every alien on the bridge felt ancient predator-prey instincts they had forgotten they possessed. They are warnings. The energy cage around Morrison flickered and sparked. Dr. Nexara's instruments were screaming warnings that she did not understand. The readings showed Morrison's body doing things that should have been impossible for any known species. "What did you mean by warnings?" Admiral Zekthol demanded, but his voice was no longer as confident as before. Something in Morrison's smile made his reptilian instincts tell him to run. Morrison's restraints were beginning to stretch. The metal bands around his wrists were slowly bending outward. His breathing had become deeper and more controlled, like someone preparing for heavy physical work. "You studied our stories for decades," Morrison said calmly. "But you never asked the right question." Commander Veltar stepped closer, though every instinct told him to move away instead. "What question? Why would a weak species create stories about learning control?" Morrison replied. "Why would people who felt powerless tell tales about holding back strength?" The bridge fell silent except for the increasing alarm sounds from Dr. Nexara's medical scanners. Morrison's bone density was increasing in real time. His muscle fibers were restructuring themselves in ways that violated everything the aliens knew about biology. "Achilles," Morrison continued, his voice still calm but carrying undertones that made the ship's hull vibrate. "You think he was a fantasy about being invulnerable. But the story is not about his strength, it is about his weakness." Admiral Zekthol tried to maintain control. "Explain yourself, human." "Achilles could have ended the Trojan War in a single day," Morrison said. "But he held back. He followed rules. He showed mercy to enemies. The story teaches that even the strongest warrior must learn restraint." The restraint bands around Morrison's wrists snapped. The sound was like gunshots echoing through the bridge. Several aliens jumped backward, reaching for weapons they suddenly realized might not be enough. Morrison rubbed his wrists where the metal had been. Red marks showed on his skin, but they faded as the aliens watched. "Hercules is an even better example. 12 labors, you said. 12 impossible tasks." "Fantasy," Dr. Nexara whispered, though her instruments were telling her that fantasy was becoming reality before her eyes. "Community service," Morrison corrected. "Hercules killed his own family in a rage. The 12 labors were not tests of strength. They were punishment, teaching him to use his power to help people instead of destroy them." Morrison's body was changing. His muscles were becoming more defined, his posture straighter. But more than that, he seemed to be taking up more space somehow, as if reality was bending around him. "The Viking berserkers," Morrison continued. "You think they were humans pretending to be animals, but you have it backwards again." Sub-Commander Cricksnell's voice was shaking. "What do you mean?" "They were not humans becoming animals," Morrison said. "They were humans who forgot how to be human. They stopped holding back, and they became something that frightened even their own people." The energy cage around Morrison was failing completely now. Sparks flew from the containment generators, as they overloaded trying to hold something they were never designed to contain. Morrison stepped out of the broken cage. Every alien on the bridge raised weapons, but none of them fired. Something deeper than training was telling them that attacking this human would be the last mistake they ever made. "David and Goliath," Morrison said, walking slowly toward Admiral Zekthol. "A small human defeating a giant with a stone. You called it the fantasy of the weak." Admiral Zekthol tried to back away but found himself frozen by Morrison's steady gaze. "It is impossible. A stone cannot kill a giant." "It can if the person throwing it stops pretending to be normal," Morrison replied. David was not weak. He was holding back. The story teaches that sometimes, just sometimes, it is acceptable to let go. Dr. Nexara's scanners were showing readings that defied everything she knew about physics. Morrison's cellular structure was reorganizing itself. His brain activity was moving into patterns that suggested cognitive abilities far beyond what any species should possess. Morrison reached Admiral Zekthol and stopped just close enough to touch him. The reptilian being was twice Morrison's size with 4 arms and natural armor plating, but he felt like a child facing an adult. "Every story you mocked," Morrison said quietly, "was a lesson in self-control. We tell them to our children to teach them how to be less than they could be, how to pull their punches, how to show mercy to weaker species." Commander Veltar's crystalline body was vibrating with fear. "This is impossible. Humans are weak. We have killed thousands of you." Morrison turned to look at him. "Yes, you have. Do you want to know why we let you?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. None of the aliens wanted to hear the answer, but they could not look away. "Because the alternative," Morrison said, "was admitting that we might be the monsters in everyone else's nightmares." Morrison walked to the main communication console. His movement was casual, but every step left small cracks in the metal floor. The security systems that should have stopped him simply failed to activate, as if they could not process what they were seeing. "You wanted to see humanity's greatest warrior," Morrison said, activating the fleet-wide communication system. "You wanted to know the truth about our myths." On every ship in the hegemony fleet, alien crews watched their screens in growing horror as they began to understand what they had awakened. Morrison stood before the main communication console as his voice reached every ship in the hegemony fleet. Across dozens of vessels, alien crews watched their screens in stunned silence as the human they had been mocking began to reveal the truth. "This is Colonel Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Corps," he announced. His voice was calm but carried a weight that made seasoned alien warriors step away from their own screens. "You wanted to understand our mythology. Let me give you a proper education." Behind Morrison, the bridge of the Void Piercer was in chaos. Dr. Nexara's instruments had completely failed trying to measure what Morrison was becoming. Sparks flew from overloaded systems as his mere presence began affecting the ship's electronics. "Every human colony you attacked," Morrison continued, "fell because the colonists chose to evacuate rather than fight back. Every human military defeat happened because our commanders refused to let their soldiers engage without restraint." Admiral Zekthal tried to regain control of the situation. "Impossible. We fought your armies. We saw them die." Morrison turned slightly to look at the Admiral. The movement was casual, but it caused a visible crack to appear in the reinforced deck plating beneath his feet. "You fought people who were following rules of engagement. Soldiers who had been trained their entire lives to use minimum necessary force." On the communication channels, alien voices began to whisper in confusion and growing fear. Ship commanders across the fleet were demanding explanations from their intelligence officers. How had they misunderstood humanity so completely? Morrison faced the main screen again, knowing that thousands of alien eyes were watching him. "You studied our stories, but you never understood their purpose. Achilles was not invulnerable. He was learning to be vulnerable, to let others have a chance to fight back." The deck plating under Morrison's feet continued to crack outward in a spider web pattern. His body temperature was rising to levels that should have been lethal, but he showed no signs of discomfort. "Hercules did not perform 12 labors to prove his strength," Morrison continued. "He did them as penance, as practice in using power, to build instead of destroy. Every task was chosen to teach him restraint." Commander Veltar's crystalline form was shaking so violently that light scattered in all directions. "The readings are impossible. His cellular structure is reorganizing in real time. His neural activity suggests intelligence levels beyond measurement." Morrison smiled, and the expression was visible to every alien in the fleet. "The Viking berserkers you found so amusing were humans who had forgotten the lessons. They stopped holding back, and their own people had to stop them. Those stories exist to remind us what happens when we lose control." Dr. Nexara was backing toward the exit, her 8 legs clicking frantically against the metal floor. "This cannot be real. Humans are physically inferior. Our studies prove it." "Your studies measured humans who were trying to be normal," Morrison replied, "who were following genetic suppressors and psychological conditioning designed to keep them within acceptable limits." The hull of the Void Piercer began to groan under stresses it was never designed to handle. Morrison was not touching anything, but his presence alone was causing the ship's structure to protest. Every retreat, every surrender, every defeat, Morrison said to the fleet, happened because humans chose mercy over victory, because we would rather lose than become what our ancestors were before we learned to control ourselves. Sub-Commander. Crixnell's voice was barely a whisper. What were your ancestors? Morrison's eyes seemed to glow in the bridge lighting. The apex predators of a death world. The species that hunted everything else to near extinction before we learned to hunt ourselves instead. Alarm sirens were now blaring throughout the hegemony fleet. Ship after ship was reporting impossible sensor readings as they detected something their instruments could not identify, spreading outward from Morrison's location. The truth about human mythology, Morrison continued, is that we are not the heroes in our own stories. We are the monsters who learned to be better. Morrison placed his hand on the communication console. The metal began to glow red-hot under his touch, but the systems continued to function somehow, as if reality was bending to accommodate his will. You want to know why we tell stories about knights and heroes? Morrison asked. Because we need to remember what it means to protect the weak instead of consuming them, to show mercy instead of dominance, to choose restraint instead of power. Across the fleet, alien crews were abandoning their stations. Species that had fought wars for millennia were running from their own weapon systems, driven by instincts older than civilization itself. This is Colonel Jake Morrison, he repeated, and I am hereby informing the Hegemony Alliance that humanity's period of voluntary restraint has ended. The main screen showed space around the fleet beginning to fill with new contacts. Human ships were dropping out of hyperspace by the dozens, then by the hundreds. But these vessels looked different from the human ships the aliens had fought before. Sleeker, more aggressive, built for purposes the hegemony had never imagined. You called us weak because we followed rules, Morrison said. You attacked our colonies because you thought we could not fight back effectively. You captured and tortured our people because you believed we were helpless. Morrison removed his hand from the console, leaving a perfect handprint burned into the metal. You were wrong about everything. The last image transmitted to the hegemony fleet showed Morrison standing amid the wreckage of their most advanced warship, smiling that terrible smile as human reinforcements filled the space around them. And now, Morrison concluded, you get to learn what our stories were really trying to protect you from. The transmission ended, leaving thousands of alien warriors staring at blank screens and wondering if they would live to see another day.